Hello everybody, and thank you very much for joining me for another Tales from the Crypt review. Today I will be talking about Season 2, Episode 17, My Brother's Keeper, directed by Peter S. Seaman, and starring Timothy Stack as Frank, Jonathan Stark as Eddie, and Jessica Harper as Marie. And this is another very good Tales from the Crypt episode. It's kind of a tough job following television terror, which is really great. But My Brother's Keeper isn't far off. It's really, really good, with a few small issues here and there. So we start out with two brothers who are very different in personality. It's pretty obvious. The only one problem they have is that they are joined together. Literally, they are Siamese twins. So they go to this bar together, and one of the brothers, Frank, is definitely the more serious one, and he meets a lady there named Marie, our other main character, and they get along pretty good, pretty well. The only problem is that his other brother, Eddie, is acting pretty annoying. He's drinking a lot, and he's causing a lot of problems for Frank. So they go out on the dance floor in a scene that's pretty amusing. Some of the humor is pretty good in this episode. The play on twins is done pretty well for the most part. But Marie finds out when she kind of runs into both of them that they are joined, that they are Siamese twins. So the two brothers, seeing this now as an even bigger problem, go to a doctor to find out about a possible operation to separate them. The doctor says it's definitely possible because they each have their own sets of vital organs, but that it's risky because they share the same bloodstream, meaning that things like drinking affect both of them, which will come into play later on in the episode. So it's basically 50-50 chance that it will or won't work. So Eddie's ready to do this, being the one who lives much more dangerously, more the risk taker. But Frank isn't sure. He's concerned that they might not survive, and he says he has to think about it more. Then we get some amusing scenes just of the brothers doing things together. I thought these scenes were pretty funny, even if they don't add a ton to the plot. But Frank is still concerned and doesn't want to sign. But things kind of start to change a little bit when Marie calls back. She apologizes, and basically the shock just got to her. So she wants to have a date with Frank. And so they do have this date, basically. But Eddie acts kind of obnoxious. They go to the symphony, I think it is, at dinner. Eddie is drinking a lot. He's annoying and basically tries to cause a lot of trouble. But this doesn't seem to deter Marie, who is still liking Frank, and Frank basically tells Eddie that he is in love with her at this point. So this could go to some interesting places from here. Then we get this bizarre scene where Frank and Marie are talking in bed, and Eddie is doing some wild stuff, I'll just put it that way, with another lady next to them in bed. Frank wants to get married, but Marie says it's just too strange. I would have to go with her on this one. Kind of a weird setting to propose there, Frank, I'm just saying. But basically, we learn that Marie's not so innocent. This was all a plot by her, basically, and Eddie, who hired her to get Frank to sign these papers. So then the two guys have a fight. This scene was kind of amusing, but I did think it was a little bit over the top. But it's fine, I guess. Basically, the two brothers fight with each other. They like punch each other and roll around and stuff. It's kind of strange. So Frank's finally ready to sign the papers as he says he can't handle Eddie anymore. And then he can be with Marie. But as he's about to sign, Marie admits, she comes back in and she admits to Frank that this was all a plot. And she tells Frank she'll marry him just the way he is, not to sign. So Eddie gets mad and basically kills Marie at this point. A pretty brutal thing to do, and not the smartest move there, Eddie. But Eddie thinks it's an okay move because he figures he won't be able to get in trouble for this because he's attached to Frank. And then Frank would also get blamed. Not the best logic in the world there, Eddie, as we'll find out in a few minutes. Probably should have thought ahead about the situation a little bit better. So at this point, Frank basically flips out, and he starts taking all these pills and drinking, and he's basically going to put himself and Eddie both to sleep, as we'll find out soon. But before this happens, it turns out he signs the paper, but Eddie doesn't see it. Now, I do have one complaint with this scene, which I'll talk about in the next scene. So they're in the hospital at this point, and it turns out they didn't get killed. They were only asleep, but it turns out that Eddie's under arrest, but he kind of shrugs it off like, yeah, right. But then he finds out that Frank signed the papers and the operation worked, and they are now apart. Now, my issue is, why did they show Frank sign the papers? I think this would have been a more effective twist if we hadn't already known that he signed the papers and that they weren't apart. It kind of gives away the twist a little bit. It's not terrible. Others might find it to their satisfaction. I just thought this whole thing could have been handled better if we were totally surprised that Frank signed the papers. But anyway, Eddie gets taken off, and things aren't going to end too well for him. But seems like Frank will be okay. Things will be okay for him. Although I do say he seems a little bit more aggressive and sure of himself than he was in the past. So overall, My Brother's Keeper is a solid episode. Like I say, I feel like a few plot points could have been handled slightly better, but this is another very entertaining episode that combines horror and humor. Very entertaining and fast-paced, and I'm going to give My Brother's Keeper a 4 out of 5. Definitely another very solid episode that I feel like fans of Tales from the Crypt will enjoy. So a 4 out of 5 for My Brother's Keeper, and as always, thank you very much for watching.